Elika is on the propaganda wing and she's like, oh, I don't know, it's not my job to think about the military strategy. No, Elika, it is your job to think about military strategy because you're advocating for something that's going to get American soldiers killed. It's going to get innocent civilians killed. In fact, that's happening right now as we speak. And so you should ask yourself, is there really a reliable path here, a militaristic path that's going to secure what I personally want, which is regime change?
I mean, at the end of the day, my view from the very beginning and still my view to this day is that this operation, whatever it is, has to be seen through to the end, because the worst case scenario is that this war ends and the regime is still in power. That's worse than if the war never happened at all. And so in terms of what I'm here to do, or what Goldie is here to do, is represent, you know, these sentiments of the Iranian people and how we feel about what these military strikes are doing, which are targeting an oppressive regime that, you know, we all know has been oppressing the Iranian people for 47 years. In terms of the military strategy, that's not really within our purview. The only thing that we can do is trust that the United States government knows what it's doing and has an effective plan to remove this regime.
Okay, but explain this to me.
You don't continue a war because you've already started one. You continue only if it corely improves security and stability. Otherwise, you are sacrificing lives to justified past decisions. Second, the idea that a weakened regime remaining in power is worse than no war ignores real-world consequences. Wars rarely produce clean regime change. More often, they produce power vacuums, civil conflict, regional instability, humanitarian crises. We've seen this pattern repeatedly in modern conflicts, where removing or attempting to remove regimes created chaos rather than liberation. There are multiple examples that didn't go well in the Middle East. History shows a consistent pattern. Removing regimes is militarily easier than replacing them with stability. Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and Syria demonstrate that regime change often destroys institutions faster than it builds freedom.
I get that, but let me just ask you this. You know, Donald Trump said yesterday that the mission of making it impossible for Iran to develop a nuclear weapon had now been achieved, which seems to be where he's edging now as the sort of totality justification for the action he took. But there's one problem, is that all the enriched uranium remains untouched, underground in Iran. The capacity to develop that into a nuclear weapon remains exactly as it was before this war was started. So I don't understand how Donald Trump, or anybody, frankly, can claim that they have stopped Iran from being able to develop a nuclear weapon when all the tools they need remain exactly where they were before it started.
Well, that's the question that's on everybody's mind, right? The only thing that we've ever asked is for this war to go to completion and for this regime to be removed. It was never in our imagination that you know, you would stop at the point that you know, their nuclear capabilities were decapitated. We were told that the end of this war would be when this regime fell, that uncompromising surrender. That's the only ambition that we were ever told. So I don't know what to tell you about this falling short at just, well,
that, you see, okay, I'm going to bring the others in. I mean, Anna Kasparian, that's really interesting because, you know, Elika's reflecting there what so many people are thinking, which is the goalposts have changed so often. You know, it was early on, this was going to be regime change. And they thought by decapitating the top of the regime and killing the Ayatollah and a lot of the top people, then naturally, and apparently this was what the Israelis told the Americans, there will be uprisings and the regime will topple. None of that has happened.
If your plan only works when everything goes perfectly, then it was never a real plan. The regime didn't collapse, the population didn't rise up, and now the goalposts are moving to avoid admitting the original premise was wrong. I don't think either Trump or Pete knows what's going to happen next.
So they've now moved, it seems to me, to a different game plan, which is actually what we meant all along, was degrading their military and stopping them building a nuke. They've done the first, that has to be accepted. They've massively degraded the Iranian military, but they've come nowhere near to stopping them developing a nuclear weapon if Iran chooses to, because the uranium is still there.
Unfortunately, you have two different countries that are involved in this effort to, I guess, either topple the regime in Iran, which isn't going to happen, or, degrade Iran's military capabilities and ability to build nuclear weapons. For the Israelis, it was never, ever about nuclear weapons. It was never about degrading Iran's military capabilities. It was always about regime change for them. But in order to build consent or manufacture consent among the American people for a war that we all knew was going to be a disaster, the American people were fed lies and all sorts of fear-mongering about how Iran is such a threat that we need to get involved and we need to disarm the Iranians. Okay, how is that working out for us? There was no strategic military plan in place. Elika is on the propaganda wing, and she's like, oh, I don't know, it's not my job to think about the military strategy. No, Elika, it is your job to think about military strategy because you're advocating for something that's going to get American soldiers killed. It's going to get innocent civilians killed. In fact, that's happening right now as we speak. And so you should ask yourself, is there really a reliable path here, a militaristic path that's going to secure what I personally want, which is regime change? And honestly, there isn't a path. There isn't a path. First of all, I don't have a path because I've analyzed the situation and realized that Iran has a formidable military and that we're going to put our soldiers in jeopardy by taking them over there. I didn't interrupt you, and you're interrupting me. Why are you interrupting me? Piers, are you going to intervene? Because she's interrupting me when I didn't interrupt her.
Yes, I think that's a fair comment. You shouldn't interrupt each other because we can't hear either of you when you do. So
I appreciate it. It is important to ask yourself, as you're advocating for military action, whether or not that military action is going to secure the gains that you're advocating for. And if you looked at the landscape, if you looked at the terrain in Iran, if you looked at what Iran is capable of doing, the fact that they control the Strait of Hormuz, you would think about all these elements before spouting off about getting the United States involved in a war that isn't going to secure what you think it's going to secure. There isn't going to be regime change in Iran. And by the way, I think it's disgusting that we are dragged into a war on behalf of a foreign country that does not plan to put any of their boots on the ground. Not a single IDF soldier is planning to be on the ground.
That's a really interesting point.
I agree with Anna Kasparian. Even though the government says it has a plan to remove the Iranian regime, the reality is very different. All of Iran's enriched uranium is still there, so their ability to build a nuclear weapon hasn't changed. The original goal of toppling the regime hasn't happened either. There have been no uprisings, and the leadership is still in place. Now the focus seems to have shifted to just degrading their military, which they've done to some extent, but it doesn't stop Iran from developing nukes. On top of that, the U.S. and Israel have different priorities. Propaganda has replaced proper planning, and American soldiers and civilians are being put at risk. Considering Iran's strong military, their control of key areas like the Strait of Hormuz, and the terrain, it's clear that there's no realistic military path to achieve regime change. So while some partial gains have been made, the mission hasn't accomplished what was originally promised, and the story of success is misleading.
About the slaughter of thousands of protesters, including many completely innocent civilians on the streets of Iran in January, for example, because the noise from the left, I have to say, was pretty... I'm not accusing you or Anna, I don't know what you both said about it at the time. You can enlighten me.
They said nothing.
But there was a deafening...
Oh, I'll tell you what I said.
Oh, hang on. There was a...
Don't speak for me. Don't put words in my mouth.
No, I actually remember very well.
Sorry, I'm actually talking...
You don't know what I had to say about it.
30,000 people were killed. I heard it from your mouth.
Okay.
There's no evidence that 30,000 people were killed. Show me the evidence.
There it is. There it is.
How many do you think were killed?
Where is the evidence, Elika? Where's the evidence?
You want me to tell you?
What's the source?
You want me to tell you?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can tell you the source. I can tell you the source because how quickly you believe in terrorist regime, but you don't believe.
Just give me the source. I don't need to.
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to tell you right now. Silence, and I'm going to tell you. Every single hospital in every single city in Iran gave a tally of how many corpses were in their beds. In total, that amounted to 36,500 people, and that didn't include the people that were slaughtered.
What source compiled those numbers?
The hospitals.
Every hospital? Okay, so you
Every
yourself
hospital
talked to every
in
single
Iran.
hospital?
I saw the list. I saw the
What's
list
the
of every
source?
hospital with every number.
You saw the list.
Google it.
Who
Google
published
it.
the list? Who published
It's
the list?
everywhere. Human rights
It's everywhere.
organizations.
You should know the
everywhere it's
source. You
published.
should memorize that. If you're
But-
so heated about
I'm
this
telling
issue.
you.
But, okay,
should
but you know
memorize
what's
that.
interesting? Okay, hang on. You know what's interesting, Anna? Yeah, you're having
Yes,
the
go ahead.
complete reverse. You're having the complete reverse.
No, I'm not.
Well,
I'm not.
okay, I'm going to explain. We haven't
The
heard
New York Times just published a piece on this
haven't
that I
heard
hope
my
you
question
read.
yet.
That I hope you read.
You haven't
Go
heard
ahead.
my question yet.
Right. You care about the deaths in Palestine, but
No,
you don't
no,
care about
not
the
that, but
Iranian
not
people.
that.
I do care about the
You
Iranian people.
got utterly,
Unfortunately,
you got,
they've
hang
been...
on. You got utterly
Go ahead.
enraged when people questioned the number of people who'd been killed in Gaza, rightly, because it turned out those numbers were broadly
Correct.
accurate, have now been admitted by Israel. And yet here you are doing exactly what so many Israeli guests did on this show about the deaths in Gaza. You're just refusing to believe any of the numbers coming out of things. So my question for you would be, well, if it wasn't 30,000, then how many do you think were killed?
I don't know. I don't know
So
exactly
how do you know it wasn't 30,000?
Hold on.
You don't know
Let
that.
me
Why are you
explain.
saying
hang on.
Elika,
Sorry,
let me make
again,
my point.
Anna,
If you're going to
Anna,
ask a
Anna,
question, let me
Anna,
answer it. Let me answer the question.
This. Anna,
I
so
know,
my
but
point
let me
being,
answer the
my
question.
point being, the very question that I used to ask all the Israeli guests who would try and cast
I know.
aspersions.
I know.
Is the same
Let
question
me
I'll put
explain
to you.
myself.
It's the same question to you, which is, if you don't know, how do you know it wasn't 30,000?
Okay, let me explain it, okay?
You don't know.
No, Piers, let me explain it. Okay, when it comes to Gaza, the Gaza Health Ministry, historically, you look at the history, they have historically been accurate and very careful when they publish death tolls, okay? They're always confirmed. In fact, oftentimes, they're an underestimate. So I know to trust the Gaza Health Ministry because of its history of publishing accurate data. In the case of Iran, we know a few things. We know because so many American former government officials and current government officials and the Israeli media were literally bragging about putting Mossad on the ground, arming people. And that's why so many of the law enforcement or police officers, security forces in Iran were also killed. Okay, there's a lot of disinformation coming out, and there are different sources publishing different information about the death toll, which is why I don't know. I have not found a source that I fully trust
and yet you
that's
are
giving me accurate data.
No, but Anna, again, I would use the same questioning I did to people about Gaza.
How many of them were killed by Mossad operatives? How many of them were actually killed by the
I'm not asking you
government?
that. No. I'm simply saying once you've admitted you have no idea how many were killed, I find it extraordinary that you would be so emphatic in refuting the 30,000 number. You don't know.
You think 30,000 people were slaughtered in 1 week?
I think it could easily
really
have
think-
happened from the scenes that I was looking at. Yes.
I don't. Well, I
Okay,
don't
you
think
don't
that
believe
happened.
it. Okay, but
I don't believe it.
Given that you've admitted you don't know, you don't know. Let me come back to to Elika. You know, I have noticed there has been I think there has been a double standard here from people on the left who I respect, where they seem to care an awful lot more about Palestinians being killed in Gaza, which I also shared their care about, and the protesters killed in Tehran at the start of the year. And it was deafening. It was deafening. And Hollywood was deafening by its silence too. And I just think that's another thing that is just wrong about this. It's intellectually dishonest to people, right? To pick and choose which
You know what's
innocent
dishonest, Pierce? The fact
Can I just jump in
that
now?
Iranians are getting killed right now. Civilians are getting targeted right now. This war began, okay, with 100, how many? 175 people getting slaughtered at an elementary school? Elika, you got anything to say about that? Do your people feel liberated?
Yeah, I do,
You don't live in Iran? You've never lived in Iran. And you have the
I've been many times.
audacity to talk about this as if it's the liberation of the Iranian
been many
people
times
as they're
to
getting
Iran.
killed, as their hospitals are being
shut
bombed,
up.
as
Shut
healthcare
up.
workers are being killed. Disgusting.
All right.
Go ahead.
Let Elika respond.
Okay.
Let Elika respond.
I'm not going to shut
when
up.
You talk about,
Well, you let her respond because
okay.
you asked me to stop her interrupting you. So I'm now saying to you,
Okay,
Anna,
go ahead, Elika.
let her speak.
Please go ahead.
When you talk about the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, you say their numbers have historically been accurate. Well, did they ever separate
disgusting.
civilians from Oh, good. Insults. That's good. Did they ever separate civilians from combatants? They didn't. And in the end, we discovered that that number did include many combatants. Okay.
The IDF
so that's
did,
the first
actually.
thing.
We know their numbers.
Correct. That's good.
83%,
right?
civilians.
Okay, are you going to interrupt?
83%.
Are you going to interrupt? Actually, Hamas said that 50,000 of them were combatants. Regardless, you are quick to trust the Hamas-run health ministry, which just shows who you trust, right? Which is terrorist regimes. Second of all, you sat there just right now and said 178 school children were killed. First of all, you said nothing about the hundreds of children that were killed on January 8th and January 9th by the regime. And second of all, where did you get that number from? The only people who have confirmed that number is the regime. And that just goes to show.
Wait, hold on. Wait, are you denying that 175 people were slaughtered in that school? Are you denying it? Are you denying it?
Let me finish my point.
Because you did deny that it was the US Israelis that did that.
Are you going to let me finish my point? There absolutely were children killed in that strike. How many? We don't know, because the only people who have confirmed it is the regime.
Yeah, but again, Elika, okay, well, let me jump in there. Because you're now doing exactly. Sorry, you're now.
If you let me, Piers, if you let me finish my point,
we know how many children were killed. We know how many were at the school.
That's not what I'm saying. Piers, let me finish my point and you'll see what I'm saying, okay? I'm not saying what's real and I'm not saying what's not real. Here is the point that I'm making. When the people, okay, tell you something, doctors, witnesses, eyewitnesses on the ground tell you something, okay, it is questioned. When the regime says something, it is believed. So what I'm saying is that I'm pointing out to the hypocrisy of how easily they believe regimes, which they might be true. It might be true.
But, I agree with Anna that the number of Iranian civilians killed in protests and clashes is highly contested and difficult to verify independently, because the Iranian government imposed internet shutdowns and suppressed information at the time, making it hard for outside observers and journalists to confirm exact figures and separate protester deaths from civilian casualties. Independent groups and rights organizations have different estimates, but due to the blackout and limited transparency, no definitive count has been established, and many numbers remain disputed. At the same time, when it comes to the claim about children being killed at a school by a Tomahawk missile, it's important to clarify that Iran does not officially possess Tomahawk cruise missiles, which are U.S.-made weapons. These missiles are primarily in the arsenals of the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, and a few other allies, and there's no credible evidence that Iran owns or operates Tomahawks, even though some reports have shown debris in conflict zones. So while we can acknowledge that civilians, including children, have tragically died in the conflict, we should be careful about attributing specific responsibility for specific weapons without verified evidence. And we need to recognize that reporting conditions inside Iran at the time made independent confirmation extremely difficult. Like and subscribe for more fiery debate.